Hello, it's Jess. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to today's video, which is going to be my June wrap up. The year is halfway over. I know we're all freaking out about how this came to be, but in the month of June, I read 8 books. It was like a good number of books, but overall it was kind of like a mid-reading month. First up, I want to start with the books that I read on my Kindle. The first one I want to talk about is Forest Bonds by J. Bree. This is part of a series. I don't remember which book it is in it, and I wanted to start with this book because, to be honest, I think I'm gonna DNF the series here. And basically the reason why is that even though I did give this 3 stars on Goodreads, it's really more of like a 2.5. And to be honest, this book was like a whole lot of nothing. It's kind of hard to explain what this book series is about because it's primarily a Why Choose romance. But like, it's like if you took a Why Choose romance and set it in the world of X-Men, except X-Men is written with like a lot more depth. We're dealing with this woman, she's 20, I believe, and all of her men, and there is this like evil army type of deal going on. Like it is hard to explain, and the reason it's hard to explain is because like honestly nothing is really fleshed out, and that is my biggest complaint of the series. I would say all of the villains seem like very mustache twirly, like there's not really any depth to them. I think this is the 4th book in the series, and I still don't really know what the villain's motivation is. We've had countless interactions with the villains, and all of them feel exactly the same. There's like not really anything new happening in the series, and I feel like we're not progressing the plot at all. I read this book and I finished it, and at the very end, in like the last 50 pages, 2 really big things happen. But other than that, this book is just a whole lot of nothing. At this point in the series, I don't know why this book feels like it has second book syndrome. I don't know why the world is not fleshed out at all. Like we're still dealing with the same amount of world building in book 4 as we had in book 1. And I feel like there's just like kind of plot holes that the author tries to explain away, and I'm like, I mean, you made an attempt, but that doesn't really make logical sense. I don't think that answers this giant gaping plot hole that we have going on over here. Now, I will say that like the entertainment factor for this series has been high in other books. In this particular book, I felt like the entertainment factor really tanked because again, I felt like everything that happened, with the exception of the last 50 pages, already happened. Before this book, the entertainment factor was high for the series, and so I kind of overlooked the glaring plot holes and the poor like motivational development and the just absolutely terrible world building, because like it's like I was having fun. So like I don't care that there's giant plot holes that I could drive an entire bus through, because if you're having fun, that's all that matters. This is a series that I don't want to recommend. However, I wouldn't like necessarily tell someone, oh, don't read that. Plenty of readers don't care about the same things that bug me in this series, so they could read this and have an absolute blast with it. But for me, the cons are just really starting to outweigh the pros, and I'm moving on from this series. Next, I want to talk about Lady of Darkness. This is the first book also in a fantasy romance series. You're gonna see this wrap up is a lot of fantasy romance. My primary source for recommendations for fantasy romance is Erin from Booked and Busy. I find that like my taste in fantasy and romance like really coincide with hers, and she is the one that turned me on to the Bloodgrace series, which is one of my all-time favorite series but is my current favorite top tier fantasy romance series. She put out a video where it was like, if you like epic fantasy, these are the fantasy romances you should read. And she talked about a series by the same author, and she said that it dethroned Blood Grace as her favorite fantasy romance series. And I was like, okay, I gotta get on that. I need to read that, obviously. But I am also a completionist. If an author puts out series that are like interconnected in some way, I want to start like with the beginning and like read through in publication order. In order to get to the series that Erin recommends, I first need to read the Lady of Darkness series. I don't want to accidentally spoil the first series by reading the second one. Anyways, that's like a long tangent. None of you care. Lady of Darkness. This was such a surprise for me in the best way possible. This is a series where you follow Scarlet, and when she was young, her mother was a healer for, I guess you would say, like criminal organization. Her mother was killed, and after that she was taken in by the like Lord of Assassins, and she was trained along with two other girls to be like a master assassin. And particularly what she's really been trained for is to hunt down and kill Fae when they come into the human kingdom, because the human kingdom has like this barrier around it that prevents the Fae from using magic, so it makes them easier to kill, even though they're still like stronger, faster, all of that stuff. So she, along with these two other girls that she considers sisters, have been doing some murder. Now, I will say, not that much murder actually happens on page. I didn't get the feeling that like it was all talk and no show, but I mean, at the same time, there could have been more stabbing. There could have been, but that's okay. It was still very believable to me. And now the reason that Scarlet desperately wants to kill these Fae is because her mother was assassinated, and they have like tracked that assassination back to one of the Fae. And so she's trying to get more information, trying to see if, you know, she can get some revenge. But at the point when we enter the story, we're kind of in this like weird transitional point in Scarlet's life because something happened. And it happened, I want to say a year before the book starts. Like a bunch of shit went down, and you as the reader do not know what happened. You're kind of like having to piece things together based off of Scarlet's inner monologue and what she says and how she interacts with the other people who are a part of the criminal organization. So really this whole story is finding out what went down and why Scarlet is the way that she is, while also discovering more secrets about like why was her mother, who was like this healer, targeted and assassinated, and like where are the little breadcrumbs leading us. That was a really long-winded explanation. This book was so good. It like actually really surprised me with how much I ended up liking it. I gave it 4 stars. I think it's really excellent. In the beginning, there was a little bit of clunkiness. There were some pacing issues. I think that just comes down to the fact that this is the author's first book. As the story really got going, the pacing improved and things kind of like evened out. It didn't feel clunky anymore. So I do think that the rest of the series will probably move pretty smoothly, which makes me happy. What makes this book so good is like the drama of it all. Honestly, there isn't really anything in this book that I think stands out as like super unique. And it's not even that like there are any like plot twists, because I think like this book, the way it's structured, you as the reader pick up on things before the characters do. So when like the plot twist comes around, and like I don't think they're meant to be plot twists, it's really more of like reveals. So when things are revealed to the characters, you're like I saw it coming. Like it's about the drama of it all and the repercussions of when the information is revealed and like what that means to the characters. And so like it's not necessarily about like the reveals being shocking things that you couldn't guess. It's more just about like waiting for the other shoe to drop, and like it's so juicy, it's so dramatic and juicy, and like the way it played out, I was just eaten up the story. I thought it was so fun. I also really like Scarlet, and I like the other characters in this book. I really like the love interest in here, and what I like about the love interest is that he keeps like messing up, and it's one of those situations where like in the moment you're reading and you're like, this is gonna come back to bite you. But like at the same time, you completely understand why he's making the choices that he's making and why he's doing the things that he's doing. You know, he makes the decisions that he makes because of care and empathy, and then like they just come back around to bite him straight in the ass. And you gotta love that. Like, you gotta love a man who is just trying his best and just cannot catch a fucking break. Like, it's really amusing. Scarlet is a really compelling main character, and things are gonna go real bad for a while in book 2. I think book 2 is just gonna be a bad time for everyone, but for me it's gonna be a real good time, and I'm looking forward to that. Okay, moving on. Next, I want to talk about the books that I read when I spent a week reading fantasy romance, because that's apparently all I read this month. The first one I want to talk about is Blood Feast. This is book 8 in the Blood Grace series, and I can't tell you about this book. Like I said, this is my favorite fantasy romance series, and in it you follow Cassia and Leo. Cassia is the bastard daughter to the king, and Leo is a vampire. In this world they're called Hesperines, but he is a vampire. He is a like trainee ambassador sent with a political envoy to like meet with the king and try to come like to peace between like the vampire nation and this particular human nation. And Cassia, due to some things in her past, has some questions that she needs answered by a Hesperine, and so she tracks down one, which ends up being Leo, obviously, and the two of them form this kind of collaboration into a friendship, which turns into lovers. It's very sweet watching the two of them learn how to trust each other and learn about each other and fall in love. It is beautiful and sweet and endearing, and I just love this series so very much. In book 8, all I can really tell you is that Leo gets a familiar. That's super fun. Love animal companions. And this book is kind of a double date quest story. You're with Leo and Cassia, and then also Leo's cousin Mac and his husband Leros, and the four of them are on this quest journey together. This might be my favorite book in the series. I would genuinely have to like reread, because I read some of them like back to back, and I just like don't necessarily remember all of the details of like which book was what for like the first 5 books in the series. But I feel like Vela Roth's writing just like ascended to another level with this book. The character development and the payoff that happens at the end of this book, the growth is just so good. It was so well plotted and crafted and put together, and just please, if you take one recommendation from this video, read the Blood Grace series. I love it so very much. As a part of that vlog, I also read 2 other books. The first one I want to talk about is Blood and Steel. This is the first book in the Legends of Thesamar. Like I said, I do have a vlog, so if you want to know more my thoughts about this book, you can go look there. But I mean, basically, like, this is a good, solid start to a fantasy romance series. In this series, you follow Thea, and she and her sister are orphans, and they are raised at this military outpost and trained to be alchemists, but Thea actually wants to be a warrior. But unfortunately, there's this prophecy that says that if a woman takes up blades, that she's going to like bring the darkness down. Something like that. That's not the exact prophecy, but you get the idea. And after that prophecy came about, they stopped training women as warriors, and now it's been, I don't know, like 30 years since then. Obviously, because you know, this book needs a plot. Thea has been training herself in secret to moderate success, and one day she is found out and they catch her holding a blade, and through a series of some events she ends up going and petitioning the king in order to be the first woman to get back into training to be a warrior. I like this book. I think it's fun. I think it's like really solid. I gave it 3 stars. There's not like really anything special to this. I am waiting to see how things progress in book 2. To be perfectly honest, it's kind of a basic series. You're gonna read this, you're gonna have a good time. It feels very comfortable if you've read a lot of fantasy. Like, the setting feels very comfortable, the characters feel very comfortable. It's got some good creepy crawly monster type things in it that are fun. The has her sister and the other alchemists, and also ends up like making some friends with some of the other trainees who are in like trying to become the warriors like she is. So like there is like a fun little found family in here. Again, it's basic, but it's good. It's fun. So yeah, if you want to hear more thoughts, check out that vlog. And the other book that I read for that vlog is Ruins of Sea and Souls. This is the 3rd book in the Fae Isles series. I feel like I've talked about this series so much this year, but you follow this girl, Emmeline, and she is living on this isolated island, and she has been hiding the fact that she has magic in this world. Anybody who has magic is bound to this evil queen who is like the queen of the Fae because she won this like big bad war hundreds of years ago. She's old as dirt, and like since then she's a tyrant. Like, you know, it's a really basic evil queen setup. And then one day the queen's most famous assassin finds her, sees her doing magic, and realizes that there's like no record of her having magic, and therefore the queen doesn't know about her. Her power must be unbound. So he whisks her away and is like, hey, you're gonna help me kill the queen. And that's a setup for this series. This book was a little bit of a mixed bag. Again, watch the vlog. Basically, there are themes in here and character work in here that I think are done excellently. There's a portion that speaks about grief in here that made me cry. On one hand, there are things that I think shine so very brightly. However, the entire like first third of this book sucked from an enjoyment point of view. If this was the first book in the series, I would have DNF'd it in the first 100 pages, because the first 100 pages of the, like, I was not having a good time. But the second part of the book, like the second half, was really good. Honestly though, that is kind of the general feeling I get from this entire series. It is a mixed bag. I did still enjoy this though enough to purchase the 4th book, and I will be finishing the series. I think if you're interested, I do recommend this series, but it wouldn't necessarily be like my top priority of trying to like get this series into people's hands. Next up, I want to talk about Flamecaster. I'm so sorry, this is a DNF for me. I do want to be perfectly clear that it wasn't that I thought anything was bad with this book. I did read the other series. This is the Shattered Realms. Like, whatever the first series, like this is the second series set in this world. Like, I read the entire first series by Cinda Williams-Shima and I enjoyed it, but I think I rated all of it like 3 to 4 stars, like somewhere in there. I was like, this is good, but like I wasn't blown away by it. And it is a young adult series, and I finished that series several years ago. I think that if I reread that series, I probably wouldn't even enjoy it as much as I did at the time. I'm not going to stop reading young adult, because I do think that some young adult books transcend age the same way that some middle grade books do, but I think I have outgrown Cinda Williams-Shima. That is a little bit sad, because I do think that this book, the part that I read before I DNF'd it at like 120 pages or something. It was well written. Like, this is a quality crafted book. When I put the book down, I just didn't want to pick it back up. And I was like, you know what? That's a sign. If you don't want to pick up a book, don't pick up a book, right? Like, this is a hobby for me. I'm not getting paid to read books. I'm doing it for enjoyment. I don't think this is the book's fault. I think that it is just, it's not for me any longer. And hopefully someone who's more in like the target demographic of this series will find it and enjoy it. Unfortunately, I am DNFing this book. The next book I want to talk to you about is Us Against You by Fredrik Backman. This is the second book in the Beartown series. I loved it. 5 stars. There's just something so special about Fredrik Backman's writing that just like speaks to me on such a personal level. His books just sink into my heart and like carve out like little chunks of it, and they make me cry. This book is fantastic, absolutely fantastic. So this is the second book in a series. Like I said, the first book, Beartown, is about hockey, but it's not about hockey. Really, both of these books are about humans and community. In both of these books, you follow so many different characters, but in the first book, the junior ice hockey team is set to like win everything, basically. It might seem like not that big of a deal that like the team is set to finally win, but like if you read the book and like you get it. What happens is one of the hockey players ends up raping a girl in the town, and it absolutely shatters the town. Some people think that saying that like the rape happens is a spoiler, but in my opinion, you need to know that before you pick up Beartown. It isn't like graphic, but it does happen on page. And the way Fredrik Backman writes about people and human emotions in this, even though it is not graphic, it definitely will affect you. So I think that like you need to be aware of that going into the first book. But basically that one event shatters the entire town, and people, you know, like they take sides, and Fredrik Backman just looks at all of the different people that make up this community and why they make the choices they made, what they could have done better, what they could have done differently. I just feel like Fredrik Backman is just so tapped into the human heart, and he writes with so much empathy, and I felt like there was just so much nuance in that first book and so much care and love put into it, and it just broke my heart. And this book also broke my heart in the best way possible. This book takes place at like the start of the new year of school, which is like a couple months before hockey season starts. And it looks at how all of the events in book 1 have affected everybody in the town. It really is us against you. And that's like the hockey team, it is the community, it is this family, it is best friends. It is just so many different us's against you's. I think it's handled so well. And again, Fredrik Backman just knows people. He just gets people. And this is beautiful. The last book that I want to talk to you about is A Flicker in the Dark by Stacy Willingham, and this is actually an adult thriller, so very, very different than the other books that I read last month. In this book, you follow a woman. I've already forgotten what her name is, but when she was young, I think like a preteen, her father was arrested for being a serial killer. She feels a lot of mixed emotions about this because it was like her own testimony that kind of was like the nail in the coffin for him that like really put him away. Now in the present day, she is a psychologist and she is self-medicating a bit. She thinks that she's like finally moving forward with her life. She's about to get married. She has a house. Things are looking good. And then some girls start disappearing again. I really enjoyed this. I had a good time. I liked it. I do love a good, unreliable narrator. And because the main character is self-medicating herself, she is definitely unreliable at times. It's fun. It's a good time. I recommend this. this. I do think Stacey Willingham's other thriller that I read, I'll put it on the screen because I don't remember what it's called. I do think that one was better. This is her debut novel. For a debut novel, this is fantastic. But I do think her second book is better. Her second book has a lot of atmosphere in it, like that I loved. I ate up the atmosphere. But I still would give this 4 stars. I still think it's a really, really great thriller. It's fun. It's compellingly readable. I was moderately surprised by some of the plot twists in here. It's a good time. There you go. Those are all of the books that I read in June. Thank you so much for being here and hanging out with me. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing. My next video should be the Summerween vlog. So if you've been waiting for me to pick up some horror, it's coming. Be safe this week, stay cool, wear your sunscreen, and I'll see you with another video next week. Goodbye!